people. Good evening. I guess there was a meeting going on. I was afraid it was like about 9 minutes before the class was to begin and I couldn't get on, but apparently there was another meeting going on. Good evening, everyone. Hope you had a little nice break last weekend, last Monday. So we're going to begin with a recitation of the Heart Sutra, which Sunny is going to put up. Okay. So how can I get all these other things here? There we go. No, Heart Sutra. Oh, Sunny. I thought you had it ready. Okay. Heart Sutra. Thus did I hear at one time, the Bhagavan was dwelling on massive Vulture's Mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great assembly of monks and a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also, at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Sharidvatiputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the endpoint of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times also manifestly and completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment and reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tadyata gate gate para samgati bodhisvaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Like that, then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, Well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharitvatiputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. So having talked about the non-inherent existence, non-true existence of all phenomena, no eye, no ear, no nose, and so forth, no attainment, no non-attainment, let's try to set a motivation for the class, bodhicitta motivation. Remembering that all sentient beings have been our mother numberless times in the infinite past lifetimes. They have been depthlessly kind. It would be very callous of us to ignore them and work for our own nirvana alone. All these mothers are suffering within cyclic existence, with the opportunity to understand about emptiness, which we might be able to teach to them to help alleviate their suffering. Think, I'm going to participate in the class tonight on the teaching by the fifth Dalai Lama on the practice of emptiness for the sake of achieving enlightenment, for the sake of sentient beings. There's a couple of sakes in there, right? In order to bring about the happiness of all sentient beings, to lead them in the happiness, I myself must become a Buddha. So I'm going to listen, participate in the class tonight with that aim in mind. I'm going to listen to the teachings in order to become enlightened for the sake of all sentient beings. So, good to see you all. So I wanted to read a quote that I have been, I said to someone recently. It's a quote that Venerable Steve Collier, who some of you may know, used to amend to his emails at the bottom, sort of like a signature thing that would be there all the time. It's a quote. It said, then the Buddha asked how they managed to maintain such total harmony. This is talking about an incident when the Buddha was asking how the Sangha was able to remain in harmony. And Anuruddha, who was one of the four disciples who were related to the Buddha, who came from Kapilavastu after he had left, and they wanted to become monks, right? This included Anuruddha, who was the son of the king's brother. So Suddhodana was the king who had given birth to the son Siddhartha, and his brother had a son named Anuruddha, who became one of the first four disciples of the kingdom. So Anuruddha replied, how the monks kept harmony. I maintain loving kindness toward my companions and all my actions, and I consider the following. Let me set aside what I wish to do and do what the venerable ones wish to. Make sense? I think, if we, in our own activities, if we can't love our friends, if we can't love our community, and if we can't put aside our own things, our own, egocentric will, I want to do this, I'm going to go over you. that's going to lead to disharmony. So if you can always have that state of mind. For many years, Steve amended his emails with that. I think it must have affected him the same way. And I find whenever I email him or text him or something, I get a reply almost instantaneously, or else an answer saying, I'm in a meeting, I'll get to you later. So, he really puts that into action. So how are you? Any questions? Anyone have any questions from last time? David, you okay? No questions? Alex? Snehi's here. Snehi, do you have any questions from last time?
No, but I'm sorry you had trouble logging on. I'm just seeing my messages now.
Yeah, we got on, I think, about 8 minutes before 7. Usually we're able to get on a little earlier. No problem.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, no problem, no questions. So we will continue. Last time we had reached the point of talking about the practice of selflessness of persons, and we'd gone through some of that up to a certain point. I'm going to just reiterate a little of that. It says, with respect to the first, that is, when you talk about the perfection of wisdom, there are two parts: the practice of the perfection, the practice of the selflessness of persons, and the practice of the selflessness of other phenomena other than persons. The first is the selflessness of persons. And with respect to the first, there are many forms of logical reasonings. For instance, the reasoning of dependent arising has 3 essentials. The sevenfold reasoning has 9 essentials, and so forth. I'd read this before, but just to go over, just to catch up, they are explained extensively in the scriptures of the great being Tsongkhapa, in his great exposition of special insight and the small exposition of special insight, which refers to the Lanrim Chemo. The wisdom section is called, in Tibetan we say Lakton Chemo, or the great Vipassana. So that's talking about how to realize emptiness. And the small exposition of special insight can be found, for instance, Jeffrey Hopkins' translation of a book called, I think it's called The Final Exposition of Wisdom. Is that right, Paul? That's the, among other things, that has a translation of the middling Lanrim. Here it's called the small exposition of special insight, but that means the middling Lanrim. So if you have access to those, you can go into more detail. Of course, Tsongkhapa wrote other texts, as I mentioned last time. He wrote the Lanrim Chemo in 1401. In 1407, the year 1407, he wrote the Lekshe Ningbo. In 1408, he wrote the Ocean of Reasoning, Rikbe Gyatso. And in 1415, he wrote the middling Lanrim, that's called here the Small Exposition. And in 1418, he wrote Gompa Rapsel, the Illumination of the Intent, which will be the subject matter of a course which will begin in June for those diehards among you who have the stamina to come on and listen to that for maybe a year or more. So Gompa Rapsel was the last of those texts, kind of like his final idea of final opinion about emptiness. So that will be a very special course. In the instructions for the practice of transmitting from mouth to mouth the experience of the omniscient bearer of the chariot of this system, Lobsang Gyatso and his sons, we find the analysis based on 4 essentials. I mentioned last time Lobsang Gyatso. You might know, who is this? His name was Kedub Lobsang Gyatso. He was the author of the Stainless Light, the great commentary on Kala Chakra, which is, you can find in the Wisdom series that Thupten Jinpa's translation team has gotten together. So he was considered one of the very great lamas. He was also in the Lanrim lineage. So we find the analysis based on 4 essentials. So this is what we were talking about last time. The first essential is to ascertain the way an innate conceiver of the I conceives I. This is the first, this is called recognizing the object of negation. And with regard to this, he quotes Buddhapalita in the text that Buddhapalita wrote, a commentary to Nagarjuna. Buddhapalita says, all phenomena are selfless. This is at the end of the 7th chapter, if you happen to have a copy of Buddhapalita. Maybe Paul is the only one that might have. So he says, all phenomena are selfless. That means they do not have a self which is inherently existent. Here, self doesn't refer only to persons. We're going to talk about selfless, self of phenomena also. It was talking about selflessness of persons, selflessness of phenomena. So that selflessness of phenomena presupposes that there's some kind of conception, there's some kind of self there. It doesn't mean in the sense of a person, but it means some kind of existence that seems to be existing from its own side. When analyzing the selflessness of the person, if both the self that is validly existent, that is the validly existent person, and the self that is non-existent object negated are not intimately identified, it is like dispatching an army without knowing where the enemy is. You know, you want to destroy the enemy, you send out your army, but you don't know where the enemy is, that you're not going to necessarily get rid of what you want to get rid of. You're not going to eliminate the object of negation if you don't intimately identify the object of negation, or like shooting an arrow without having sought out the target, you know, just shooting it anywhere. Shantideva's Bodhisattva Charyavatara in the 9th chapter, verse 140, the first 2 lines of that very famous verse says, without making contact with the thing imputed, the non-existence of that thing is not apprehended. The translation you have is also Jeffrey's translation. This is his translation of those 2 lines in his exposition, final exposition of wisdom, which was written like 30 years after his first translation. So without making contact with the thing imputed, it's not, the non-existence of that thing is not apprehended. That what that's referring to is without identifying the imagined self, which you're kind of imputing upon something. It doesn't really exist. You're just kind of assuming that it exists. Without making contact with the thing imputed, the non-existence of that thing is not apprehended, cannot be apprehended. That means without recognizing the object of negation, clearly, you are not going to be able to refute it, contradict it, to show that it is non-existence. It is non-existent. You're not going to be able to realize the emptiness of that object of negation. Do you understand what object of negation means? Anyone have a doubt about that? Sheila, you know what object of negation means? You have to, if you unmute, come over here.
It's the thing you're trying to refute, that it's conventional existence.
Was that conventional existence?
Yeah.
No.
That it doesn't exist in a conventional way.
No. Conventional existence.
No, we want to refute that.
No, we don't want to. We don't want to refute conventional existence. Like, for instance, Sheila conventionally exists. But the way that Sheila exists is not the way that we think of Sheila. We think of Sheila as inherently existing from her own side, truly existing. The merely imputed Sheila, which is just the name that we give to your body and mind, your 5 aggregates, That's not to be refuted. That does exist conventionally. So that's not the object of negation, not the conventionally existent Shila or conventionally existent phenomena. What's to be refuted is an imagined object which is existing inherently. If we talk about Shila, something when we think of Shila as though Shila is existing there from her own side without me needing to label onto her body and mind. It's what you yourself would identify when you look at your own mind and you instigate the sense of, pleasure or having been abused by someone, the sense of I so strongly that other thoughts become a little bit subdued. That sense of I, that sense of an inherently existent I, is the object of negation. Okay, so it's not the conventionally existent I. Larry, you have a thought.
Is it a reified name, like I am I?
Say that again. A reified name, did you say?
Is it a reified name?
So what do you mean by reified? You mean something added?
And I am I.
Okay, I'm not sure that if that's what I haven't heard reified means that way. So
I mean,
pardon me?
I think, I mean, I do.
Okay, so when we're talking about this I, as we saw last time also, there is a sense of I when we don't reify or add onto what is there, something that doesn't exist. There is an I that does exist. There is a conventionally existent Larry. If you superimpose upon that, having apprehended or thought about just conventional existent Larry, because of some instigation, you imagine it exists the way that it appears to your mind as inherently existent. That I is the one that's being refuted. It's something that is our mind superimposes upon the conventionally existent I. So in other words, the way that the mind processes, as soon as we give a name to something, if I say my car or a tree or something like that, as soon as I give a name, which is legitimate, it's just conventionally existent, it immediately appears to our mind because of imprints from beginningless time that thing that we've imputed from our side, which is given the name to that appearance, actually exists in the basis of its parts, in the branches and if we talk about a tree, the branches, the trunk and the roots and everything. It's almost as though it is existing from its own side. So that is a reification. That is an imputation onto something which is conventionally existent, adding something there that doesn't really exist. So whenever we experience phenomena, there are two appearances to our mind. There's the appearance of the conventionally existent, let's say Larry, conventionally existent Larry, but that has been reified or superimposed with the appearance of an inherently existent Larry. To our minds now, we can't differentiate the two. The appearance of the inherently existent Larry or the inherently existent I is what it predominates. We can't sort of slip that away and see the conventionally existent Larry. As soon as there is an appearance of an inherent, conventionally existent Larry, it appears to be inherently existent. There's that superimposition of the appearance of an inherently existent Larry.
But the appearance, the conventionally existing Larry is just an appearance.
Yes, that's all we have to our minds, appearances, right? But to someone who is, say, to the Buddha, or to a bodhisattva who has realized emptiness directly, okay? In meditation, they've realized the emptiness of Larry. When they arise from that meditation, there can be the appearance, again, of the inherently existent Larry, either if Larry is the other person or if you're Larry and you're thinking about, you see, you've realized that I myself, the I that I've been holding on to, this appearance of an inherently existent Larry, although the appearance exists, there is no object that it corresponds to. It is totally empty of the import that we're attributing to it. There is no inherently existent Larry. Like the example of Santa Claus, right? It looks like Santa Claus, but it is, you know, the person walking down the steps dressed up in the uniform, but it is empty of being Santa Claus. So even the conventionally existent I does appear, but whenever we're not in meditative equipoise on emptiness, whatever the conventionally existent I appears, it will be superimposed with the appearance of an inherently existent I. They're inextricable. Only the Buddha can differentiate between those.
But we can say that the conventional appearance is also empty in the sense that it is neither existing nor not existing.
Conventional existence, yeah. What we mean by conventional existence is something that we would have to investigate a little bit more deeply. Almost, it's said that to really understand how phenomena, intimately understand how phenomena exist conventionally, you have to first realize emptiness. It's only upon that, when you awaken from that meditative equipoise, if you've realized emptiness, you can see how phenomena are appearing to be inherently existent, but they are empty of that, and that the only way that they can exist is just in a relative conventional way. When we say, you know, where is Larry? He's in, I'm not sure where you are. Maybe, are you in New York?
I'm here.
Yeah. Where are you? In New York?
Colorado.
Colorado. So here is Colorado. So where's Larry? He's in Colorado. Where? At this address. Where? You go into the house. Where is Larry? He's in that room. You know, you go in and you look around and you say, where is Larry? And someone points to you. Up till then, that's called conventional analysis. You can say, oh, that's Larry. But if your mind is not satisfied with that and wants to find what Larry is somehow within his parts, within his aggregates, is Larry the body? Is Larry the mind?
Right.
Because it appears to be existing from his own side. That's the point where you go beyond conventional analysis. So let's leave that for the time being. Let's go on a little bit further, okay?
Okay.
Thanks for your question. So if we don't intimately identify the object that does exist, the conventionally existent self, and the inherently existent self, which we're believing in, the only way that we can know that I mean, you can't know the inherently existent self because it doesn't exist, right? But it appears. It appears. You have to recognize that appearance without making contact with the thing imputed, without recognizing that appearance of the inherently existent I. The non-existence of that thing is not apprehended. If an image of the object negated does not appear well to the mind, the meaning of selflessness that negates it cannot be ascertained. Okay, are we on the same wavelength? Larry, you can take down your hand unless you have another question. Okay. Therefore, when a selflessness of persons, okay, there we go. Therefore, when a selflessness of persons is presented, the word persons refers to the nominally and validly existent person. So selflessness of person, that means if we talk about Larry, that the conventionally existent Larry is empty of what our mind is superimposing upon that conventionally existent person, some kind of inherently existent person. When selflessness of persons is presented, the word persons refers to the nominally and validly existent persons. Nominally existent means just imputedly existent. And validly existent means that for Lama Tsongkhapa, the conventionally existent person is a validly existent. It's apprehended by a valid cognition. Let me just finish this, Diana, and I'll come to you in a second with this paragraph. That is, common beings like ourselves, common beings, not superior beings, not Arya beings who've realized emptiness, and superior beings, that's how we translate Arya being, someone who's realized emptiness directly. Within the 6 types of migration in the 3 vehicles, the hearer, solitary realizer, and bodhisattvas, all the beings, including Buddhas are also persons. The person's mode of abiding as if able to establish itself in its own right without being imputed by thought is called self, or is called inherent existence. The person's mode of abiding as if, that means it is appearing to you as if it is able to establish itself in its own right without being imputed by thought, is called a self or inherent existence. Okay, Diana, what do you think?
I understand this, at the elementary school level. My analogy is to academia, where we would say, this is a flawed logical argument. Notice what this looks like so you can make sure that if you hear yourself saying it, you'll know that that is not a valid argument, for example. So the idea of, this is a definition of what we are going to watch out, and we are not going to fall into the trap of thinking falsely. I think I understand that, as I say, at the elementary school level.
Right.
Where I lose my footing is when we say something like, as long as space endures, as long as suffering beings endure, so too shall I endure until I, etc., etc. When we use the word I in that context, are we just going to have a little asterisk in our mind saying, for conventional purposes,
Well,
the speech is as if I exist, but I know that I do not, in the way that I see myself as falsely existing from my own side?
so as the Dalai Lama often uses that verse from Shantideva's Bodhisattva Charyavatara, so Shantideva, who originally was saying that, right, was talking about his conventionally existent I, because he knew that he existed conventionally. Mm-hmm. He knew that he was empty of inherent existence, and he's talking about the conventionally existent I. There's no worry when you say something like that, unless you're talking to someone who has not been educated in the basis of emptiness, in the Madhyamaka view. When you're talking about I, like in the Jataka tales, the Buddha told about, he said, in a previous life, I was that king. He tells a story about a king who did this or that, or a prince who did this, or this animal who did this or that. And he said, in a previous life, I was that animal. So that means the continuity of the Buddha's mind stream at that point was a bodhisattva manifesting in a certain way. All of this conventional existence that we perceive is, from the Madhyamaka point of view, at least Lama Tsongkhapa's presentation, is all validly existent. It's valid in the sense that the appearances of an I, or suffering or happiness, whatever we experience, all is a result of karma, actions that we've done in the past, right? When the Bodhisattva, the previous incarnation of the Buddha, was born as this glorious animal in the forest with a golden fur and everything like that, and it was able to speak, and the king could understand him. All of this was a result of previous karma. So those appearances are a result of past karma, and they are consistent. And so the apprehension of that animal as a being, just a conventional being, merely imputed being, is valid, is a validly existent consciousness. What is the problem is when you go beyond that and you assent to the appearance as though it's existing from its own side. That appearance existing from its own side has no basis. It is actually, it does appear, you can't say that the appearance doesn't exist, but it doesn't accord with, it doesn't relate to some object that seems to be there that's causing that appearance. So we can talk about a conventionally existent I, conventionally existent person, conventionally existent animal, tree, whatever, as conventionally just imputedly existent, and without superimposing upon it some assent to that appearance of true existence, that is said to be valid.
Okay.
Okay.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
So further, the innate conceiver of I, which conceives of I, based on the nominally existent person, is of three types. So I mentioned this last time also, and so I wanted to mention that here it seems like it's saying there are three types of innate conceivers. That's not what is actually meant in the translation. I've retranslated this section, so yeah, I'll read it here. My retranslation. Further, in the context of innate apprehension of I, if you've ever heard in Sanskrit, it's called ahamkara. Have you heard of aham? Where's Snehi? Is Snehi still here? Snehi, what does aham mean in Sanskrit, you know, or in Hindi?
Just I.
I. So aham, what about atma? What does atma mean?
I think Atma is more sort of that permanent self that will go from life to life.
Well, yeah, it means self. So there's a difference, although there's synonyms from the Prasangika point of view. Aham, I, and self are synonyms. So when it says here, in the context of innate apprehension of I, which in Sanskrit is ahamkara, I maker, sort of like believing in the I, that apprehends I, aham, or self, atma, upon the basis of the nominally existent person. There are three things in relationship to that. So the innate apprehension of the I refers to this, the meaning of innate means that it has existed in our mind stream since beginningless time, that we will grasp to this I, we say innate grasping to the I, okay? We also have intellectually formed ideas of I. I am a physicist, I am a monk, I am man, I'm a woman, I'm American, I'm whatever. But there's always, underneath them, there's always, since beginningless time, there's been a stream of innate That means when we're born, it's there without needing to be educated about I. You know, you don't have to tell the baby what they are. They have an innate apprehension of their self-identity. There are three things with the relationship to this. The apprehension of I, qualified by mere imputation by thought upon the basis of imputation. Okay. Second, the apprehension of I qualified by inherent establishment or inherent existence. Svabhava siddhi. Apprehension of an I not qualified by either of the two. This is how it's laid out in the text. Jeffrey sort of melded them together in his translation. So the first, the apprehension of an I qualified by mere imputation by thought upon the basis of imputation. The first is an intellect that is a correct apprehension of I, which exists in a person who has generated the Madhyamaka, the Madhyamaka view in their continuum. So someone who has generated the Madhyamaka view in their continuum, who has an insight into that, doesn't necessarily mean a direct realization. They can have a correct apprehension of the I, like we were talking with Larry a minute ago. If Larry came to the conclusion, there is a Larry that is validly existent, that is just imputed upon my aggregates, that doesn't exist inherently. This first one is an intellect that is a mind that is a correct apprehension of I, which exists in a person who has generated the Madhyamaka view in their continuum. That is an apprehension of I qualified by mere imputation by thought upon the object of imputation. Make sense? A lot of words, okay? The second, what was the second? Apprehension of I qualified by inherent establishment or inherent existence. The second is the fully qualified innate apprehension of I. So this is the only one which is innate, really. The correct intellect that is a correct apprehension of the I is not necessarily innate, is not born. We haven't had it since beginningless time. The second is the fully qualified innate apprehension of I that is to be destroyed or overcome by the antidote on this occasion of the path of wisdom. What is to be destroyed or overcome? So what we want to overcome is, so there's the appearance of I to our mind, and that appearance exists, the appearance of an inherently existent I superimposed on the conventionally existent I, which we don't really notice. We notice the appearance of the inherently existent I. I have to get my hand in the right place here. And our mind believes that, grasps to that, assents to that, believes that, right? That's called I grasping. So the second, the apprehension of an I qualified by inherent establishment. That means the grasping to that, the belief in that I is this innate apprehension of the I that is to be destroyed or overcome by the antidote on this occasion. What's the antidote? Well, the antidote is meditation on emptiness, using the logic that we were beginning to talk about last time. First, recognizing the object, and then through logic and reasoning, realizing it could not exist in the way that it appears, and then coming to the logical conclusion that the object that's believed, it's not the appearance. The appearance does exist, but the object that you think the appearance refers to or is emanating from the thing, that object does not exist at all. An inherently existent I does not exist at all. So that is to be destroyed by the antidote on this occasion of the path of wisdom. What's the antidote? Wisdom that realizes emptiness. So once you've realized that, the mind which is grasping to or apprehending that I and believing in it, assenting to it, that ignorance begins to dissipate, become weaker. Even in one meditation session, it can start to, it seemingly become less believable. That's how you eventually get rid of that ignorance, that grasp to the inherently existent I, through developing the wisdom that realizes the object it is grasping to is not grasping to the appearance, it's grasping to the object that it thinks the appearance refers to, that the object behind the appearance, an inherently existent I. When you realize that that doesn't exist, then that ignorance begins to dissipate. And eventually you can cause it to cease completely. Okay, so the third, the apprehension of an I not qualified by either of the two, not being imputedly existent, not being inherently existent, is the conventional valid cognizer. So when we talk about, when the Buddha said, at that time I was that prince, I was that animal, this is talking about the conventional valid cognizer. A valid cognition means something which is understanding things as they are simply as an imputation. The third is the conventional valid cognizer that posits, establishes I in the common ordinary beings who are not affected by systems of tenets, since they do not differentiate nominal imputation and inherent establishment, inherent existence. So, like I said before, just the blacksmith pounding on the horseshoe, and they say, you say, where's your horse that you're making the shoe for? And it's just, oh, that's the horse over there. Not at that point, not emotionally involved with the horse over there, just accepting the nominally existent appearance as a what did we say here? Conventional valid cognizer. So this is talking about three kinds of ways that the mind can relate to phenomena or to the I. It can correctly understand that the I that exists in a person who has generated the Madhyamaka view in their continuum, that the I is just merely imputed. Or it can be what most of us have most of the time, and a grasping to that as truly existent, as inherently existent, not the conventionally existent I, but believing in an inherently existent I. The third one is not qualified by strong apprehension of either of those alternatives, just seeing ordinary nominal appearances and just going along with that. There's Larry, there's Diane, there's a flower, there's a horse, so forth and so on, without getting emotionally involved in them. So then the next section here, we're starting with there's a parenthesis that goes on for a couple of paragraphs. This is all Jeffrey Hopkins and Geshe Rapton's commentary. So this is not in the fifth Dalai Lama's text, but it's very useful to understand. Though uneducated common beings, this is talking about the third kind of apprehension here, uneducated common beings, uneducated in the Madhyamaka philosophy, right? That they don't differentiate between inherent existence and imputed existence. Though uneducated common beings do not propound inherent existence or nominal imputation, they don't talk about, oh, you mean that horse that's imputedly existent, or that horse that's inherently existent? They don't talk about it. You go to the bar, you go to the bowling alley, no one's going to be talking to you about, unless they happen to be the tavern philosopher who studied Madhyamaka. None of them are going to be talking about inherent existence and imputed existence. Though uneducated common beings do not propound inherent existence or nominal imputation, the I does appear to them to be inherently existent. Okay, it does appear to them to be inherently existent, no matter what they think. Though, and because they sometimes assent to that appearance, though without reasoning, they also have a conception of an inherently existent I of type 2. That means innate grasping. So that means we don't always, how does it say here? Do not propound, it does appear to them to be inherently existence, and because they sometimes assent to that appearance, they sometimes, if they look at that and if someone, if you were talking about your car, okay, where's your car? Oh, it's over there. That's my Subaru. And you're doing something, and then you hear some scratching, and you see they've just taken the key on their keychain, and isn't it called keying? You talk about that in New York. Someone put a big scratch in your car, and suddenly you assent to that appearance of inherent existent Subaru. You're not always, you can just say, oh, that's my Subaru over there. There's no big problem. But without thinking of it as inherently existent or imputedly existent. But because the imprint in our mind is there, the seed of the grasping to that inherent existence is there. When there's a little instigation, we say, because they sometimes assent to that appearance of inherent existence, though without reasoning. They don't have a reason to verify that. They also have a conception of inherently existent I, type 2. They, like all other beings, even including those who have been educated in wrong systems of tenets, have consciousnesses that do not engage in conceptions of inherent existence. So it's not as though every what do we say? We don't always engage in grasping to an inherently existent phenomena. We don't always engage in grasping to that, although it's there in the background. The appearance of the inherently existent person is there, but sometimes that's not important to us. We're just thinking about something in general. Therefore, it is not being said that all the conceivers of I in the continuum of a falsely educated person are wrong, and it is not saying that all conceivers of the I in the continuum of uneducated persons are right. Rather, both the uneducated and the falsely educated both have the second and third types. They sometimes grasp with the inherent, conceiver of I, inherent I grasping, and sometimes they just apprehend the appearances without grasping them to be inherently existent. That's the third type here that we were talking about. Also, the falsely educated and the uneducated occasionally have the third type of consciousness, conceiving of an I which is not qualified by being either nominally imputed or inherently existent. However, neither the falsely educated nor the uneducated can distinguish between an imputedly existent I and an inherently existent I. That's not within their ken. What they can. So in Singapore, people had something called a Singlish. Anyone know what Singlish is? There's Singaporean English. Anyway, you wouldn't understand the joke unless you're in something. And like I say, can you turn off the light? Can. They say, it's that rather than saying I can, I will. It's just playing on the word can. So, However, neither the falsely educated nor the uneducated can distinguish between an imputedly existent I and an inherently existent I. Both must become educated in the Madhyamaka view of non-inherent existence and imputed existence to overcome their innate tendency to assent to the false appearance of the I as if inherently existent or covering its basis of designation. Okay, so that's more or less where we got last time, maybe a little bit further, but just important to reiterate this. Further, a tight, firm mind thinking of I exists in our mental continuums on all occasions of sleep and waking. Now, that may seem contradictory because the third type was when you talked about the I, not differentiating it as inherently existent or imputedly existent. So this is a little bit of a philosophical problem in the Madhyamaka, whether there are maybe two mental streams, one of which always there's, as it's saying here, further, a tight, firm mind thinking I exists in our mental continuums on all occasions of sleeping and waking. So does that mean there's just one mental continuum and that's kind of subdued? When it says a firm, tight mind, seems like when it's saying something like that, it sounds like it's manifest, right? If you say that there's always, in a lot of the Madhyamaka texts, we are always under the influence of self-grasping, then you wouldn't be able to have that third type of mind where you're not grasping it to be inherently existent, you're not grasping it to be or you're not believing it to be imputedly existent. So it's a little bit subtle point. Paul, have you had this discussion with any of the Geshes who taught about emptiness?
I don't think so, no.
So, like for instance, Arya Deva's famous quote that like the body faculty, remember, the sense faculty of body pervades the entire body. In the same way, ignorance pervades all of our perceptions. It almost sounds like it's always there, manifest. But we have experiences where that is not manifest. So it continues, however, like a mirror and an image of your face, in that the presence of the mirror yields a clear image of the face. When you meet with conditions of happiness and suffering, the mind thinking I manifest very strongly. So that seems, when it seems to saying tight, firm mind previously, it doesn't necessarily mean manifest. There is that the potential for that is kind of subdued. And when someone offends you or pleases you in some way, that manifests more strongly, like I, okay? Or like your car, not necessarily I, self, the self of the car, someone keyed your car just got hit by another car while you were having a sandwich in the sandwich shop, and you look out there and suddenly you see it's your car, and there's a strong manifestation of an inherently existent car that has now been inherently damaged, and so forth. Also, on occasions when such conditions are not encountered, that is, strong emotions are not encountered, it is a little unclear. Most instructors on the view nowadays, so this is talking about the time of the 5th Dalai Lama, 1600s or something, most instructors on the view nowadays have not analyzed whether such is manifest or not, whether it is the grasping to I is manifest all the time, or if it's only manifest when spurred, that someone sticks you in the back with their pen or something like that, and the sense of I becomes very clear, and you believe in that at that time. They speak about practice relying on impoverished words such as just saying, the way that the innate conceiver of an I conceives the I. So when you talk about the innate conceiver or the innate I grasping, that's talking about the wrong one. They just say the way that it does. They don't analyze how it does. How is it conceiving of the I? They're just using mere words. Such instruction does not at all concord with the essentials, like pointing an accusing finger at someone whose face is not well seeing and saying, this is yesterday's thief, and so on. So you don't see things clearly. The so-called instructors of his time, they're just talking about some mere words, saying that that's the object of negation without really seeing it clearly. Therefore, you first need a clear notion of happiness or suffering that was actually caused by someone else. Remember we were talking about last time. Think about when you were offended or someone complimented you, say, how good you are, how kind you are, you've lost weight or something like this, caused by someone else. If not, you should recall a former occurrence of such to the point where it appears clearly to the mind. Okay. So I mentioned also in this regard the practice of Chu in the charnel grounds. The people would come with these drums, and late at night, maybe where there's no moon even or something, they would. It's kind of a creepy place to begin with, right? All these other all these corpses around and everything, and they would play this huge damaru. Sometimes this big Lama Zopa would play sometime, and blow on a thigh bone trumpet made from the thigh bone of a human. Also, we would say creepy, right? And in so doing, kind of giving rise to fear, the other spirits that are there, the owl comes and at that point, the I manifests very strongly. It doesn't have to be only, thinking of something that's benefited you or harmed you. It can be just fear like that, when that I appears very clearly. For example, if someone falsely accused you of being a thief, the thought, I robbed so-and-so, does not exist in your mind. If you didn't rob them, this is assuming you didn't rob them, right? You're innocent. Someone said, you're a thief. And so at that point, nevertheless, thinking that he accused you of such a theft, you sometimes have strong hatred for that person. Why? Because at that point, the appearance of the I becomes more clear. The inherently existent, the appearance of an inherently existent I becomes clear, and your apprehension or grasping to that becomes strong. And that gives rise then to the possibility of generating hatred. If you've been offended, if it's caused the I to arise because of something that was pleasant, can give rise to the generation of attachment, another klesha, another disturbing emotion, right? Nevertheless, thinking that he accused you of such a theft, you sometimes have strong hatred for the person. At that time, this I, which is the object of the accusation of theft, the object of the accusation of theft, you stole, or you think, I did not steal. That I, which is the object of the accusation of theft, and which is held firmly and tightly in the center of the heart, seems even as if it can be seen and grasped by the hand. What does that mean? It means it's so palpable. It's like it's really there. That inherently existent I, almost as though you can't refute it. It's said that the meditators who meditate on this first essential point, recognizing the object of negation, they say that they sometimes meditate on that for weeks, months, just watching and letting it become really strong, the appearance of the I and the grasping to that, believing that's really there. There's no harm in that, because this is what's called kind of a Gedanken experiment. Am I pronouncing that right, Nadine? Do you know? What does Gedanken experiment mean in German?
Thought experiment.
Thought experiment, right? So I remember it, and when I was in college, the instructors would talk about Gedanken experiments. You just imagine something. What would it be like? Schrodinger's cat. Those of you who've studied physics know Schrodinger's cat and so forth are Gedanken experiments. So similarly, which is the object of action inherent in the center of the heart, seems even as if to be seen and grasped with a hand. Similarly, if another person caused you to achieve a desired aim, and you reflect that such and such help was rendered, who is it rendered to? I, me, rendered to me. I received the benefit. The I, which is the object helped, appears forcefully from the center of the heart. Or if someone says, I love you, something like this, you're wonderful. That I, that is the recipient of those words, when they said, I love you, you is meaning I, me, right? They're saying it to me. Which is the object helped, appears forcefully from the center of the heart. In reliance on your cultivating either of these two modes, being harmed or helped, the manifest mind, thinking I, so now it's talking about the manifest I. It's as though there are two kinds of ways. The self-grasping is there kind of unmanifest all the time. That's what when Arya Deva is talking about just like the body faculty pervades the body, the ignorance pervades all of our delusions. The delusions only arise when that apprehension of the I becomes manifest. Otherwise, it's a little bit subdued. In reliance on your cultivating either of these two modes, the manifest mind, thinking I, causes other coarse thoughts to become dormant. So because that I grasping is so strong and dominating, it takes all of your attention, other thoughts become dormant. And so you can recognize at that point the object, how it's appearing, how your mind is grasping to it, whether it's believing it or not, right? And you should allow the innate conceiver of I to increase in strength, even for weeks. At this point, the way that the mind conceives the I should be analyzed. You've let it get strong, so it's so palpable, it seems real. Then you analyze it. This is where we were talking about last time. There's the appearance of the inherently existent I that has become more manifest because of thinking in this way, something that harmed you or helped you. And the mind that's believing in it, grasping to it. At this point, the way that the mind conceives or grasps the I should be analyzed. It is extremely difficult within one consciousness to analyze both the conception of an I and the way it is conceived. The first being the recognition of the I think that means the way that it is appearing to your consciousness. Difficult to recognize these two at the same time, how the I is appearing and how the mind is reacting to that appearance. The second being the recognition of its qualities of self-sufficiency and so forth. So when you talk about conception of the I, that just means the mental image, because the mental image of the I, the appearance of an inherently existent I, is a conceptual mind, right? Well, to the mental consciousness, it's a conceptual mind. To the appearance of inherent existence to your sense consciousnesses are not conceptual, but your mind thinking about them become conceptual. If the force of the analytical consciousness is too strong, the strength of the conception of I is destroyed and becomes unclear. This is what I'm just reiterated what up till here is where we got last time. Okay, but worth going over this again. So you have to alternate a little bit. You watch how the I is appearing, and then with a corner of your mind, you try to recognize how your mental consciousness is reacting to that appearance. Is it believing that that appearance exists the way that it appears as inherently existent? Yes, definitely it does. Until you've started to realize emptiness, you're always going to be having very strong grasping to that appearance as if it were true, that it's referring to something that's really there, an inherently existent I. If the force of the analytical consciousness is too strong, the strength of the conception of I is destroyed and becomes unclear. So if that's the case, how should the analysis be done? That's the next question here. Question, how should the analysis be done? Through the force of having cultivated calm abiding, even if you don't have fully qualified calm abiding, you have some concentration, right? So you try to cultivate that in between sessions, calm abiding, tranquil abiding, trying to hold on to an object of consciousness without being distracted by other thoughts, without being, letting other emotions take you away by excitement, without lethargy and sinking mind interfering so that the apprehension of the object becomes unclear. You alternate the antidotes to that to hold the object in mind. Like say the appearance of the Buddha, visualizing Buddha in front of you, about one body length in front, the size of your outstretched hand at that distance, holding that, or visualizing yourself as a deity, holding that single-pointedly and letting go of other thoughts and so forth. There are many kinds of objects of calm abiding, but you try to cultivate calm abiding to in some way like that. Through the force of having cultivated calm abiding, you have gained an ability to settle on any object of stabilizing meditation. When you're just holding it, you're not analyzing, you're just holding it. Any object of stabilizing meditation or analytical meditation. So what's the difference? If you're talking about visualizing the Buddha, at first you engage in analytical meditation. Oh, the Ushnisha is curled up, blue-black hair, he has long earlobes, his eyes are thin and compassionate, he has a hair curl between the eye. You analytically, you go through the various stages one by one. That's called analytical meditation. And then once you've got something, even if it's not totally clear, because you won't have the appearance, a totally clear appearance right away, you just hold whatever you have, satisfied with that, until that begins to degenerate. And then you again engage in analysis so that it becomes clear again. So you alternate between analytical meditation and stabilizing meditation. Thus, in place of concentration on, for instance, the body of a Buddha, that's how you could practice shamatha, tranquil abiding. You should cause the manifest mind which thinks I to appear. Okay. So this is in place of the Buddha's body. You might say this, I'd rather think of the Buddha's body than the inherently existent I. But this is, at this point, this becomes your object of concentration. You should cause the manifest mind which thinks I to appear, while the general consciousness remains on the I, the appearance of the I, right? The appearance of an inherently existent I, with distinct force. That's your main thing. A corner of the mind, sort of like you're doing. Can you do two things at the same time? Can you? What is the famous thing? Can you walk and chew gum at the same time? You know the expression. Snehi, you can do that. Yeah, good. Okay, so. So most of your mind maybe is walking, but some attention is on the chewing. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you're enjoying the gum and you're just sort of subliminally aware of your walking so that you don't walk into the mud or walk off the side of the cliff or something like that. With a distinct force, you hold the general consciousness on the appearance of the I. A corner of the mind should watch its mode of apprehension and analyze the way in which the I is being conceived. So you're mainly watching the appearance of the inherent existent I that you've cultivated through being, remembering being abused or whatever, or loved or whatever. And you watch how the mind, with the corner of the mind, how the mind is reacting to that. With the distinct force, a corner of the mind should watch its mode of apprehension. Its mode of apprehension means the mode of apprehension, the way in which the mind is apprehending it, meaning the appearance of the I. Does it believe that it exists that way? Or is it thinking, oh no, that's fantasy, it doesn't exist that way? For instance, when you are walking with someone on a path, your eyes are mainly looking at the path. I was always talking about the gum and the walking, right? So mainly, here is saying you're mainly walking at the path, but with the corner of your mind, you are watching your companion. You're talking to someone, you're circumambulating the stupa or something, and you're talking to someone. Part of you're mainly watching the path, but quarter of your mind is just watching your companion, or watching that you don't fall over the side of the cliff or something like that. Previously, the I of the thought I, okay, the thought I, what does that mean? That means the I that's grasping to the inherently existent I, seemed to exist in the center of the heart, but it was not ascertained in what terms the I existed. The I appeared in your mind, but you weren't aware of how your mind was reacting to that. But it was not ascertained in what terms the I existed. You didn't come to a conclusion how the I, in what terms the I existed, in what way the I existed. Was it just an appearance, or was it really existing in the way that it appeared? From now on, a corner of the intellect, corner of the mind, mental consciousness, is to analyze it well. Sometimes it will seem related to the body. Sometimes it will seem to be related with the mind, that I. How the mind is thinking of it. Sometimes it will seem like the I is somehow, especially if someone said, oh, you've got a great complexion today. You know, you've lost some weight or something like that. You look so glorious. Maybe the I seems to be related with the body. At other times it may seem to be related with the mind. If someone has said to you, aren't you clever? You know, something like that. Sometimes it will seem to be related with other individual aggregates, feelings, you know, I am sad, you know, unhappy feeling. Sometimes it will be related with other individual aggregates, feelings, discriminations, and factors of composition and so forth. At the end of the arising of such a variety of modes of appearance of the I, modes of appearance of the I. So it sometimes appears to be related with the body, sometimes appears to be related with the mind or the feelings or discriminations and so forth. Why? What about discriminations? Why? What kind of discriminations? In Vasubandhu's Abhidharma Kosha, when he talks about why the Buddha talked about 5 aggregates, why he took off feeling and discrimination separately from all of the other mental factors and compositional factors aggregate, right? 2 of them, feeling, discrimination. So feelings are the main ways that ordinary people, what would we say, beer and potato, Budweiser, football watching people engage the world, feelings. Discriminations are the main ways that, you know, what do you say, intellectuals? That could be, yeah, that could be good because usually the beer and potato peoples would use intellectuals as a pejorative term, right? The main way that intellectuals engage the world in terms of analyzing things. This is, the war is good, this is good, the economy is this and that. At the end of the arising of such a variety of modes of appearance, you will come to identify an I that exists in its own right. So it's appeared in these various ways, sometimes the body, the mind, but in the end, when they begin to subside, you will come to identify an I that exists in its own right, that exists inherently, that from the start, from the beginning, is self-established, existing from its own side, existing undifferentiably. What is that? Undifferentiatedly in relation to the mind and body, which are also mixed like milk and water. You know this example? If you take an eyedropper of milk and you drop it into a tumbler of clear water, at first maybe there'll be some little swirl of white in the water, but if you wait long enough or if you stir it first, it disperses within the water, the milk, and they become, in your mind, undifferentiable, right? Like water and milk or milk and water. This is the first essential in the cultivation of wisdom. The first essential point, recognizing the object of negation. So if you think that the I appears to be the body or the mind or the feelings or discriminations, you haven't got the final object of negation here. You want to have one in which it just appears to be inherently existent and indistinguishable from body and mind, just existing there from its own side. If such an identification crystallizes, if you can begin to, bring this about, cause it to manifest this sense of I, mere analysis alone will cause you to attain ascertainment of the non-inherent existence of I. I mentioned in previous class, those yogis who say that they meditate for months, maybe even a year, to recognize the object of negation. Once that's crystallized, a mere analysis will cause you to attain ascertainment of the non-inherent existence of the I. That is the next point. So when we talk about the 4 points, first was recognizing the object of negation, then establishing the pervasion, and then if the self did exist, in this case, it would either have to be identical to the aggregates or different than the aggregates. That's called the pervasion. It would have to be one or the other. You have to establish that. And then you see it is not inherently one with the aggregates. It is not inherently different to the aggregates. Those are the 4 essential points. Once those 3 points, after recognizing the object of negation, once that crystallizes, mere application of this logic can be done in minutes or a couple of days, that you can have an ascertainment of emptiness. So the most important point is recognizing the object of negation. If such an identification crystallizes, mere analysis, that is, it has to be one or different, it's not one, it's not different, therefore it is non-existent. The non-inherent existence of the I. If you do not identify such an I, analysis falls apart without ever getting started. Make sense? Alex, what do you think? Make sense? Yeah. Mintu, are you in California there? San Francisco? Maybe you're off making a burrito. Okay. Oh, no.
Oh, no, I'm here.
Oh, okay. What do you think?
I think that whatever that you say makes sense. If you identify the object of negations, then you can apply logic to it. I guess my only question is just that at what level of meditation, meditative tranquility do you usually need to see the object of negation?
So you don't have to have fully qualified shamatha. You have to start experimenting now. You have to use whatever degree of concentration that you have to try to recognize the appearance. And when you have very highly developed tranquil abiding, you don't have to instigate the I so much. Right now, because we don't have such good concentration, it's very useful to instigate the I by remembering being abused or being fearful or being, pleased by someone's words to you and so forth. Then that I can appear. But once you have fully qualified tranquil abiding, you can start to see how it's appearing with just a little bit of instigation. You don't have to use so much. Okay. So you can start now by using that kind of method. Yeah, I think I used the example the other day when I looked at my Bank of America checking account or something like that. And it seemed like something, I bought a new computer and they charged too much. And I thought, why did they charge so much? And suddenly, distress rose in my mind. And then I realized afterwards I misread the statement. But at that point, whatever happens to you, if something bad happens to you, use that opportunity to recognize the I. If you become ebullient, like really great, oh man, the Mets won, or the Green Bay Packers won, or something, use that opportunity to try to recognize the I. Let go of those other things at that point. Just try to recognize the I. I'll finish. Yeah. Go on.
Usually, my other concern sometimes is just that if if somebody practice this kind of yoga, right? So
Say again?
if somebody
Some-
try to do this practice, does it basically interfere with your other more conventional aspiration in some sense? Because I feel that in a lot of things that we do is that when we talk about life in a modern society, we talk about goal setting and aspiration and dream, and people usually say, okay, imagine that what do you want to do for 5 years from now? Or imagine that you have this car, imagine you're a millionaire, so on and so
Yeah,
forth.
yeah.
You have to have a very solid, concrete eye that you imagine that you want to go there. Then you can kind of channel all of your mental, emotional resources to try to attain that. But then if
Yeah,
you
you've
try
gone to too many Silicon Valley seminars, Minto, or maybe you've been giving them or something. Yeah, so that is true. You know, people solidify the eye, they imagine these things and so forth. But here we're talking about something else. We're talking about the holy Dharma. You know, the real refuge is not becoming more wealthy or becoming equivalent to Larry Ellison or Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or something. The real support from suffering is the holy Dharma. And in this case, the supreme Dharma, the ultimate Dharma.
sorry, they're doing the fire alarm in my home. Let me turn off my mute for a second.
The ultimate Dharma is a realization of emptiness, true, the true path, and that which is brought about by the true path, which is called true cessation. When you eliminate those delusions, then you won't necessarily be, you won't have the wrong motivation to start a bigger company or so forth. You might have a right bodhisattva motivation to be able to accumulate funds to be able to benefit sentient beings. So there's no thought in Buddhism that you can't make money, that money is bad or something. Or you may try to develop some kind of company which will help sentient beings without any ulterior motive of your own, ego gratification and so forth. So just let me mention one last thing here. Chandrakirti's clear words, which is called in Sanskrit is the Prasanapada. Chandrakirti wrote two great commentaries on Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom. One is the entering into the middle way, the Madhyamaka Vatara. That's called a meaning commentary. It doesn't talk about every verse in Nagarjuna's text, but Chandrakirti wrote another text called the Prasanapada, which is a word commentary, which is talking about everything, every word in these karikas, these stanzas that Nagarjuna had wrote. So this is his other text, the Prasanapada. He said, consider whether the object of a conceiver of a self is the same as the mental and physical aggregates, or is something different than the aggregates. Okay, so this is the basis of our second essential point, the establishing the privation. If the I existed inherently, it would have to be the same as the aggregates. Here it says the mental and physical aggregates. That means if you break down the 5 aggregates into 2, it's mind and body, right? Mind includes the 4 aggregates that are mental, and body is the body aggregate, form aggregate. Or is it something different than the aggregates? This is setting up that which we will talk about next time. Okay, Sunny, you have something you wanted to remind me the class is over, right? You have to unmute. Sunny, you there?
Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't, I was scrolling up, I couldn't find it. No, I have a question, just a clarification, that if a person accuses you of being a thief, and you get this feeling of aversion, and you have your afflictions, that's not what they're talking about. It's that's not the I is separate from that then. And then but the affliction, the feeling makes you able to detect the I within that.
A little bit like that. Indeed, the affliction, if it's anger or, affection to the person because they said something nice to you, those are not what you're looking at.
Right.
You just recognize that in so doing, having been harmed, recognizing that you've been harmed in some way, that instigates, because listen, remember when I said the self-grasping is there all the time, but it may not be manifest, right?
Yeah.
This helps it to manifest, become fully visible, fully grown. And once it's fully manifest, at that point, you can let go of your anger, your affection, whatever, and just watch how it's appearing there. Maybe sometimes you have to remember, oh, he said I was a thief, or he did this or that, or she said this or that. Sometimes you have to remember that to revivify the appearance of the I. But in accordance with, I can't remember who asked, Alex or someone, you don't have to have fully qualified shamatha if you can manifest it strongly. In time, just a little bit of instigation or just remembering the I from before, when you have better and better concentration, you don't have to recall something that has been harmful to you or something unpleasant or pleasant. It just appears very strongly to you. And with the better concentration, you can let go of the other thoughts in the mind. Here you're instigating it. That in itself causes the other thoughts to dissipate. So like when you're angry, you're so angry, someone gives you your favorite ice cream or Coca-Cola or something like that. Get away from me. Your mind is concentrating only on that one thing. Okay. How are we doing? Okay. So
Thank you.
Yeah. So we use our time. Any question before we end? We're going to do a little dedication, and then we'll have time for question. But anything urgent? Okay. Oh, so Poon King has a question. Poon King, where are you? You had your hand up, but maybe you just, there you are.
Yeah.
From Singapore. What time is it in Singapore?
I just want, is in the morning, just after 8:30. Yeah, in Singapore in the morning. Maybe I should let you do the prayer first before
let's do that dedication first. Okay, you've got first choice afterwards. So recognize that we tried to set a motivation at the beginning, that we were going to be listening and contemplating about wisdom so that we could eventually become enlightened for the sake of sentient beings, because to become enlightened means to have a state where your mind is omniscient, omnipotent, omnipotent, omnipresent, always present, and knows perfectly the path to lead sentient beings, knows their minds, their aspirations, to lead sentient beings perfectly out of suffering into enlightenment, out of the compassion for them, remembering their kindness to us, remembering our equality with them. We tried to set that motivation at the beginning so that listening to the Holy Dharma itself has some virtue, but with that motivation, it becomes very positive, very powerful, virtuous karma that we've created. So as to not give an opportunity for that karma to be destroyed in the future, or to ripen in ways that would not necessarily be beneficial to our spiritual path. We make prayers and dedications at the end, thinking, due to this karma that I've created, may it ripen in ways that bring about my continued spiritual development, day by day, year by year, life by life, up to and including my achievement of enlightenment. As a result of this karma, may I become a Buddha and lead all sentient beings out of suffering into everlasting happiness. See if you can develop that state of mind, which we call dedication, dedicating the merits. Due to these merits, may I quickly become enlightened being, a Buddha, and lead every sentient being into that very same state. How wonderful that would be. Like having gotten a big check from the income tax, refund or whatever it's called, and dedicating that to your nephew or niece's college education or something, make a firm determination, I'm going to use it for that. Okay, so we don't need other other dedication today. I've gone over a little bit. Those of you who have other obligations, feel free to leave, but I will stay for a while. And Poon King has the first question.
Thank you. I've got maybe two questions. First one, I would like to check with you. When you say a mind, watching a mind, you were mentioning in the lecture just now, the general mind watching in the corner of, of mind that is anger or...
No. Corner of the mind is doing the watching. It's not the mind is watching the corner. The corner of the mind means the main part of the mind is watching the appearance of the eye.
Yeah.
And a corner of your mind, just a little on the, it's like a spy in the corner watching how the general mind is reacting to that appearance. Is it believing it or is it not believing it?
Yeah, what I want to understand is that from what I understand that the mental phenomena, mental consciousness can only be one at a time. It cannot be simultaneous. Yeah. Right. So what I have difficulties in do some little bit of meditation of watching my mind, or I'm angry. Where is my anger? I watch my mind, and as soon as I watch my mind of the presence, actually that emotion, whatever it is, disappears. So it's
that's good.
Kind of like
if you got rid of the anger that easily, that's wonderful. Yeah.
I mean, you're trying to watch the present mind of, you're trying to watch that emotion, because of a mind stream cannot be a mind consciousness. A happy mind cannot coexist with unhappy mind. So a mind is like mind consciousness can only exist one at a time, rather than like the sense consciousness, they can come all the time. All at one go. So what I'm saying is how it's a little bit difficult for me to watching the, or I'm prideful now.
No, but that's not the object. That's not the object that you're watching here, Poon King. You're not watching the pride. You're not watching the anger or the affection or whatever. You just use that to stimulate the appearance of the eye.
Sure.
So it becomes palpable. So then the question is, as you said, the Buddha said, I can't remember exact quotation, maybe Paul knows it. Each consciousness is is just individual. So there's just one individual mental consciousness, one eye consciousness. You can't have two eye consciousnesses at the same time and so forth. But still within that one consciousness, you have the ability to put that mental energy into do different things. Like say, for instance, you're watching the opera, you're savoring, maybe in the opera you don't eat, maybe it's more American thing, football, you're savoring the pizza. Some part of your mind is engaged in attending to various things. The mental consciousness has that flexibility. It isn't as though all of its attention is on one thing. When it is all completely on one thing, that's a characteristic of what when we talk about the mind in its the ways of knowing and so forth, that's what's called inattentive perception. Because you're so concentrated on the opera, even your companion says, Poon King, we have to go, we have to put money in the meter. Completely, it appeared to your ear consciousness, but your mental consciousness was so invested in, say, the eye consciousness, watching the opera or whatever, you were oblivious of that. But that's a very rare circumstance. Most of the time, our mind has the ability to the mental consciousness. One mental consciousness can be, partially paying attention to something, partially paying attention to something else. You can think of it in different ways. It may alternate to paying attention to your ear consciousness or your tongue consciousness or your eye consciousness, or as in this case, one consciousness, a little corner of the mind, a little bit of that mind is invested in watching how the mind is watching the eye, how the mind is reacting to the eye. The same thing when we talk about shamatha. You have to have a certain kind of vigilance, right, to watch whether sinking or excitement are arising. So you're watching the object, let's say the Buddha's body, but part of your mind, part of the mental consciousness, like the same kind of sense of this, kind of like from a corner, is watching in the mind. Is the mind becoming excited? Is it, falling under the influence of attachment to something, remembering past glories or past pleasures, or anticipating future? Or is it, so that's the same kind of sense that one mind, part of the mind, the one mental consciousness, like you say, when it says in the sutras, each consciousness is is individual. Still, that mind, part of it can be invested in watching whether sinking and excitement are there. At the end, when you're close to achieving shamatha, you have to let go of that minor investment in watching whether sinking and excitement are there and develop the mental factor equanimity. You remember when you talk about tranquil abiding? In that case, then all of the mental energy is focused on your object of concentration, and you can develop fully qualified shamatha. Otherwise, it's almost like inattentive perception before that. When you're still investing some in vigilance or alertness, watching whether sinking and excitement are there, some of your mental energy is invested in that. Same thing here. Now you're doing it consciously. You're investing some of your mental consciousness, like vigilance, to watch how the mental consciousness reacts to the appearance of the eye. Most of your mental consciousness is watching the eye, how it is appearing. And part of it is watching how the mind is reacting to that appearance, whether it's believing that, so like that's the innate grasping, or whether it is not believing that.
Nevertheless, they are alternate.
In your opinion, yeah. In your opinion, they're alternate. From different points of view, philosophical points of view, they can be both present at the same time. It's not a settled issue, I think, philosophically. Some people will say, oh yes, they have to be alternate. But one consciousness can, when we're talking about vigilance, when you're talking about tranquil abiding, one consciousness has the vigilance or alertness, however you want to call it, that's watching whether sinking and or excitement are there, whereas the main part of your mental consciousness is watching the object you're concentrating on. Okay, so let's leave it there. So anyone else have a question?
My second question would be.
Okay.
That, you were talking about the imputation, the object of the first essential, the imputation.
The first essential is not the imputation. First essential is recognizing
I mean the object of negation, but we are talking about the imputation.
Okay.
The imputational object, which is not objectively existence. And what I want to ask is that the imputed object has the base. The imputed object I've got in front of my computer. I know that I impute my computer, and I impute my computer, but the base, which I call a computer, how do I account for that? Is it still that base is also from my imputation?
So when we read the Heart Sutra at the beginning, I don't know if you were here for the beginning, Avalokiteshvara tells Shariputra, when asked, Shariputra asked, how do the Bodhisattvas meditate on the perfection of wisdom? Avalokiteshvara says, the Bodhisattvas sorry, a phone call came and it took over my screen. I'm sorry for that. So Avalokiteshvara tells Shantideva, Shariputra, the Bodhisattvas meditate on the emptiness of the aggregates also. So the implication of that is the I that the Shravakas meditate on as imputed upon the aggregates, they just meditate that the I is selfless, is lacking a self. We won't go into detail what way they recognize that. But for them, the basis of the I, the aggregates, the body, the arms, the feelings, the discriminations, they exist inherently for the Shravakas in their philosophical treatises. Although if they realize emptiness, they definitely realize the basis is also empty. So with regard to your computer, the same thing. There's the basis of parts, the screen, the keyboard, all of the things, wires coming in and out, that you impute computer onto. And then you think, well, what about the parts? Don't they exist inherently? They too exist only as imputations, validly exist conventionally as imputations. They also are empty of any inherent existence. You can watch the keyboard, the parts, they appear to be inherently existent, but if you meditate on those parts, they also have parts. Like my keyboard letter W has different parts to it. They also are empty of inherent existence. In the same way that Avalokiteshvara told Shariputra, the Bodhisattvas meditate on the emptiness of the aggregates also, the parts also, not just that the object imputed upon the parts is empty, but even the parts themselves are empty.
By saying this, is the so-called aggregates of the base in Prasangika is not part of is not the nature of the mind. It's not the nature of our mind, right? but somehow when I impute, the object is there. So the imputation seems to be relating, or like seems to be like mind-only school that is like in the nature of my mind. You know, the outside is outside object, but is that not the nature of mind, or
I'm not
nothing
sure.
to do with mind?
So
the outside object.
if you talk about highest yoga tantra, you know, in the final stages of the completion stage of highest yoga tantra, you try to recognize that even the appearances are of the nature of the mind. I think someone else, either you or someone else asked me this question, but that's something different. That's not talking about yogacara. That is, I think maybe Nadine had asked about this. Did you need to know yogacara, chittamatra in order to practice highest yoga tantra? Because it seems like in the completion stage, there's something like all phenomena of the nature of the mind. But that's talking about something different. Subtlemost mind and the subtlemost wind are of the same nature. They're inseparable, and therefore you can recognize that the appearances, which are the way that the subtlemost wind manifests as an appearance, that is of the nature of the mind. But that's something different. Here, the objects, from the Prasangika point of view, we say that the objects exist external to the mind. Okay, so let's leave that there, because someone else might have a question. Maybe no one else has a question, but let's give someone else a chance. Anyone else have a question they'd like to ask?
Otherwise,
Sheila?
I will ask a little bit.
No. You got two questions. It's already almost 9 o'clock here. It's 9 o'clock in the morning there. So no other questions. So if you can continue reading now with in the text about the establishment of the pervasion. That means if the self existed, it would have to be either the same as the aggregates or different than the aggregates. This comes about in collected topics. There's a subject called one and different. One and different. Chiktantade. So that's being applied here. If something exists, if two things exist, they either have to be identical or different. So that's the basis for this. But there is a lot of subtlety involved in establishing this. So read about that, and then we'll talk about that next time. See if you can meditate during this week, recognizing the object of negation, the appearance of the, we'll say the appearance, is the appearance of the eye an object of negation, Paul?
Is the appearance of the eye the object of negation? No.
Okay, so that's what generally you think. No, it's the object that you imagine, that you conceive of as that appearance referring to. But actually, that appearance of the eye is also called the ultimate object of negation, because when you achieve enlightenment, there is no longer an appearance of an inherently existent phenomenon. To anyone else other than a Buddha, when you are not in meditative equipoise, there's always the appearance of inherent existence. So although generally we talk about the conceived object, and the grasping mind is also an object of negation. That is what you want to negate in the sense of causing it to disappear. And even finally, at the very end, when you achieve Buddhahood, the appearance of inherent existence will no longer arise. So see if you can recognize the object of negation, and Poon King will try to either alternate her minds watching that, or see if she can use it like in shamatha, where one corner of the mind, you're mainly watching the eye, one corner of the mind is watching how the mind is reacting to that appearance. So thank you very much. Thanks for your patience. Get to bed.